Okay. Hello, everyone. This is our test automation meeting, and this is a public meeting, and it will be recorded and posted on the YouTube. And I hope everybody can see my screen. I'm sharing it, and these are the topics for discussion today. And if there are any other items that we want to discuss, we can add it to it later if we have time. Then we can start discussing the first item. So the first one talks about, oh, before I go there, I assume that everybody, whoever is involved in the test automation have already gone through the Voltha test strategy document that was floated by Sauro on the emails. If not, there is also a Google Drive where you can go through it anytime, and you can reach us if you have any questions about those documents. And we also have this Volta Brigade uh, uh, dashboard that is created, and this will give us all the stories that are as part of the test automation brigade currently. And please feel free to pick up any item on this, and if there are anything that you want to create new, then do create it and also let us know. And there is a Google spreadsheet which is also talking about all the test cases, and giving a detailed description of what each Volta ticket is doing. And we have a couple of columns here, and from the previous discussion, in the last meeting, we have updated this spreadsheet a little, and removed some PONSIM related test cases from here, and also added two columns in here which talks about Jenkins, name of the Jenkins job, where this particular test case is running. And each test, again, most of the test scenarios can be run on both physical pod and BBSIM. So we want to just indicate which Jenkins job is being run on, I mean, which Jenkins job is handling these test cases. So I'm not going in very detail in this, but when you pick up the test case and then assign your ticket here, please make sure to update the sheet with your name against it. And then if there are any specific showstoppers that have been observed by any means, like if there are any issues going ahead with the test case, or if you have some discussions on how to go about automating this particular test case that you have taken up, then you can always reach us on the Slack or on the mailing list. Okay, any general questions on this particular topic before I move on to the agenda items? Okay. So the first item we just wanted to bring up is unifying BBSIM and physical pod test case. So currently, the implementation of the tests in Volta system test repo is, we have a different test case for physical pod, and we have another test case which runs on BBSIM. And these sanity tests are doing exactly the same thing, and using and also leverages most of the framework in the system test repository. And the framework is very similar. I mean, sorry, I should say it's similar, and it's exactly same, the function calls, if you see in the sanity test of these two related areas. So we there was a discussion even in the stabilization call, and there were some comments on it. So we thought that it's better to unify the BBSIM and physical pod test cases. So that means we are trying to create just one test case, and then the SIM test case, you, by passing in parameters to that, whether you want to execute as part of the physical pod or BBSIM, that can be passed as a parameter, and then you can execute the functional test. So there are couple scenarios which are very similar in BBSIM and physical pod, and those can be achieved by the way that we are right now doing. So the strategy that we are following is, in the physical pod, we are referencing all the attributes of the pod. Let me bring it up. So any physical pod that we are currently using, and then we run the test cases on a physical pod, we define this kind of YAML file. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. Let me go back. So pod configs is a repo, and in that we have a deployment configuration, and this is the name of the pod. Flex OCP card is the name of the pod that currently we are using it for running the Volta based test cases. And this YAML file describes the attributes of the pod, like whatever we want to use it, either to build the pod or the attributes that we want to use it as part of verifying a test case. We have defined it in this format. So the first section talks about nodes and switch if it is there in your pod, and this is the OLT section, and then it talks, and there are some specific attributes. This is what we use as part of the test, and there are ONUs section here, and the RG section in followed by that. And it, depending on the number of ONUs that you have, you might have to repeat this particular section down here with the source and destination, and it depends on the configuration how your pod is set up. This is how we fill in the details, and this is being parsed with on the Voltha test case which runs on the pod, and we parse this particular file, and then we access this. But let's say if we want to authenticate a particular ONU, we read it from here, and then we authenticate it, and we do the subsequent steps followed as part of the functional scenario.
So Chitra,
Yes.
if somebody wants, I mean, I'm assuming that people who have access to hardware, for example, Hema at Infosys, um, they would establish their own pod, and they would write their own pod config, like the one you're showing over here, and then push it to, so there would be like what you've called here, this is the flex pod. What was the name of this file again?
Yeah, this is called Flex OCP card. This is the name of the
Okay.
pod that
So
we.
Hema would have something similar like Infosys, Volta, whatever, .yaml, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's say if in
And they would push it to our Gerrit. They would push it into this pod configs repository.
Yeah, it depends, I think, because let's say if anybody has a pod, and if we are establishing a tunnel between Infosys and us here on ONF, and we want to build the pod, if they want if they want to use our Jenkins and build the pod, they can use this pod configs repo here, and then they can push the configs once they define this particular file.
I mean, they don't necessarily need to use our Jenkins, right?
Yes, if they
Or
are
do they?
not, no, that's the reason I'm bringing it up. So let's say if they are not using Jenkins, then our Jenkins, ONF Jenkins, then they can definitely still define this file, and it's better to put this in their local repository if they are running the test cases, because the test case is the same, but the referencing to this particular YAML file could reside in their home directory or somewhere in their local directories, and then they can run their test cases locally.
Okay.
Because the pod configs, the idea behind pod configs is that we want to maintain all the pod related files which we at ONF is managing, the ONF Jenkins is managing.
Okay, that's fine. So they can have their own Jenkins, they can have their own pod configs file, all local to their lab, and they can use the tests from our test repository, right?
Yes.
What would need to change in the tests if they were to run it on their pod?
In our tests, they don't need to do anything in the test. The only important aspect is only defining this particular file. Once they have this defined, then when we are executing the test, we pass this as a parameter for the test. So the test is automatically parsing the values file that we are passing with the test case.
Right. So when you launch the test, you pass in that parameter.
Right, when we are executing
Okay.
it. Exactly.
So let me ask Hema then, was that clear? What is the
Uh,
process you are
yes,
thinking
yes,
about to
Saurabh.
establish your pod? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, as of now, it is clear. So we are trying to bring up a pod here. So once it is up, then we'll get more questions. So we'll reach you
Okay. And
guys.
how many ONUs do you have on your pod?
We have totally we have three ONUs. Out of three, we are planning for other setup also. So we can use one as of now.
Okay. So, I mean,
So
Suchitra will go
is
into
that
this.
okay? Yeah. In the hardware specification, they have mentioned three ONUs.
Yes.
So is that required, or we can proceed with one ONU also for now?
So the yeah, I mean, ideally you would have three, two
Okay.
on the same PON port and a third on a different PON port. So that covers a lot of different issues, ideally. But
Okay.
Suchitra will go through this that um, depending on the ONUs that you list on this file that Suchitra is showing over here, the tests will adjust, right? So if you have only one ONU listed, then the test will only test that particular ONU. But if you have
Correct.
three, then
Yeah.
it'll go through the test will adapt to ensure that all three are functional. There are
Yeah.
some
Got
test cases that will be written that will depend on having multiple ONUs. So, for example, you want to test that one of the ONUs is completely functional and has gone through authentication, has gotten a DHCP and can ping, whereas the other ONU is just doing nothing because it hasn't been authenticated yet, so no pings will succeed over there. So there are going to be test cases like this that will check that you know things can happen independently for an ONU and doesn't affect other ONUs. So ideally, you would want to have more.
yeah.
But even if you have one to start with, then then that's a good step.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Saurabh. Got it.
Thanks, Hema.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one more question I have. Actually, you have mentioned splitter, right? So instead of that, we do have attenuator here, so we can use it, right?
So when you're using two ONUs on the same PON port, you will need a splitter, right? Um, um, the attenuator is only going to work for
Yes.
one ONU, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So um, and so it's possible that if when you have multiple ONUs and you use multiple PON ports, then on one PON port where you're only putting one ONU, you can use that an attenuator. But on the other PON port, you will have to use a splitter because both ONUs have to be on that PON port.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, and then just to add one more point here, like even if you have one OLT, I mean, sorry, one ONU to start with, it's fine because right now, that way, when you start defining this file, you would understand it, and when you run it, it's easier. And to if there are any issues, and it's to debug is also easier. So maybe you definitely, I recommend even if you have one ONU, you should just begin defining this file and then start working on it. And the
Yeah.
test,
Sure.
yeah, and the test is exactly same. So this is the repo, right? The Volta system test, and in the functional we have the Volta pod test, and this is the test which actually is right now, currently it's just running on the physical pod. And if you notice here, there is a parameter which talks about number of ONUs, and it, we can right now the default is 1. So if you have multiple ONUs in future, then when the pod configs is defined accordingly, we can run the test, and then by passing overriding this number of ONUs attribute to how many ever ONUs you want to test. So that is the one that we are working on currently, because right now it's just assumes that there is only one ONU and the test is written in such a way that because we just wanted to start with the sanity test first, and then we started writing this. But once this is parameterized, even in the test case here, then that could be definitely used. So as part of the integration, uh, right here in this agenda item, we are talking about BBSIM and physical pod. This is what we are doing, where we are parameterizing the option for the test case to take the number of ONUs and then run accordingly.
I just want to repeat one thing that you've already said, Suchitra, but
Yes.
the other thing that we are working on is we're going to make the BBSIM based tests look just like this one, right? So you can use the same test and either run it on a BBSIM based environment or a physical pod based environment. Now the BBSIM based environment is not going to be able to do all the things that you can do in the physical test, but we don't want to write two different kinds of tests for two different environments. So so the same test should be able to work either in a physical or in a virtual environment. So what Suchitra is showing right now is for the hardware-based tests, the physical environment-based tests, and we are adapting the BBSIM-based test to look just like this and use the same kind of methodology. Okay, so the folks like Gilles or others who are working on the BBSIM-based tests, it's going to change a little bit, right? And Andy is working on that to make the BBSIM-based tests look like the physical-based tests or the setup. Was that clear?
Yeah. Okay. So currently, my functional test runs on BBSIM, but with 16 ONUs. Obviously, we don't have the hardware for that, so I guess I'm going to have to override that in the well, I need a separate job for that, which I don't have yet. But once I do, then that same job should work on both physical hardware and BBSIM. And it would work on the BBSIM with 16, and say we could downsize the number of ONUs by overriding that in the as an argument in the call somewhere. Is that the way? Does that make sense?
I think it does, but I'll leave it to Andy and Suchitra to answer.
Okay.
Yeah, so Gil, right now we are working on the BBSIM as well. So this is the reason that I brought this configuration up here. So let's say when we have the, as Saurav was saying, so I was going to say the same thing, that we have to define a file which can work with BBSIM as well. So we need to define things, the same
Okay.
file for BBSIM. So you would give your ONU IDs here, and then user ID password if it is applicable for the source and destination and all these things. And let's say if there are no attributes that are, some of the attributes might not even be useful for as part of BBSIM, then you can just omit those sections, and then you can just give it and make it null for now, and then you can just start defining the file. And you would repeat the same sections based on the number of ONUs you have. And once, yeah. So right now,
so right now it's running. The tests are running without this file. Okay, without any knowledge of that. I guess it implies what there is in terms of BBSIM. But right now, okay, what you're saying going forward, we're going to have one of these files for BBSIM.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And I should have an example of that in a Garrett patch this afternoon, because I'm pretty
Okay.
close to. And then we can talk on Slack about how to expand that for the 16 ONU case. But I think it should be pretty straightforward.
Okay, great.
Okay. And I want to also point out some of the differences by going with this approach. So not all scenarios with BBSIM are achievable because there will be some scenarios like rebooting the OLT, ONU, failure scenarios, just working on the hardware itself. Those are not applicable to BBSIM. And even like some of the, going forward, we will have some complex scenarios which we will be writing as part of the pod. Let's say you have authenticated and then DHCP and you have pings going on one of the ONU, and on the in parallel you have authenticated the second ONU, while monitoring that the first ONU is still be able to ping. So a mix and match of these kind of scenarios, so which are not possible with BBSIM. So the basic
Yeah.
scenarios would be definitely be applicable to BBSIM, and those will be achieved by having defined similar scenarios in this particular file. So that's what we are going to do right now. And
Yeah, I was having a discussion with Andy yesterday as well. In Robot, you can we can tag test cases, and that way you can exclude certain test cases from running if you're doing it on BBSIM or you're doing it on hardware, vice versa. So I think that might be the way to go.
yes, definitely agree. So right now we have a capability of excluding by giving these kind of tags here.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so let's say even right when we unify the BBSIM and physical pod, currently the BBSIM test cases are different. The way we have written the BBSIM are different. Like what I'm trying to say is, if you notice that the first line talks about validate OLT in ONOS is create a device and enable the OLT device is one test case. And then after that, we have another test case in BBSIM which talks about validating OLT, and then other test case which talks about verifying the AAA users after authentication, as an example. So now we will not have them. So when we have, because this is the approach to the test case, so this entire block of commands are together as one test case. So the BBSIM would also report as one test case right now. So it would not have like 7 test cases anymore once we have unified code here.
So I'd like to make the point, though, that the tags approach that I think Gil was talking about won't work for this kind of test because, for instance, the line 58 validate authentication runs WPA supplicant.
Yes.
But we don't do that in BBSIM because it has its own process.
Yes.
Yeah. So we need to not run line 58 if we're using BBSIM. So we're going to need to put some kind of conditional right there on line 58. If setup equals BBSIM, then don't do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was going to go there after
Okay.
I was explaining the differences. Thanks, Andy. Yes. So yeah, these are some of the keywords that we need to skip when we are executing BBSIM. Definitely. Like let's say the ping is also not possible as part of BBSIM. So we need to have a way to remove that. Yeah. So this is the approach that we are following as part of the BBSIM and combining the BBSIM and physical pod related test cases. Any other questions or concerns on this item?
I have one. Is there anyone on the call who also has access to hardware resources to set up a test pod for on a physical pod? other than Infosys? Okay, thanks.
Okay, so moving on. If there are no other items, then I'm going to go to the next topic. So the next item is talking about testing other adapters like PONSIM and simulated adapter. This was the question that was brought up by David on the stabilization channel yesterday, and he was asking if the test cases or the framework that we have can also run on these particular adapters, and if we are making an attempt to test these adapters. So I would like Saurav to talk on this. What is the priority so that we all know what we want to focus?
Yeah, so I think we want to de-emphasize or deprioritize PONSIM going forward. So it's only if there is someone like like ADTRAN, for example, who might want to do things with the ADTRAN adapter on ADTRAN hardware. Then we can consider, expanding the test cases for that particular case. But mostly it should be sort of invisible what adapter you're using and what hardware you're using. But PONSIM specifically, I don't think we are really focusing on, because the control plane aspects of testing, you can do that with BBSIM. The only advantage that PONSIM gives you is that it does give you an emulated data plane. But however, most of us feel now that even if you prove things on an emulated data plane in PONSIM, there are no guarantees, so to speak, that it will actually work with real hardware, because the adapters are completely different, right? And PONSIM completely ignores the whole OMCI aspect of things that OpenOLT uses. So what we can consider in the future, once we are more settled and going forward with the minimum things that we need to do to get started, and everybody's working on the test cases, what we can consider is that we can optionally add a data plane element to BBSIM if we need to. And I say it's optional because when we are doing scale testing, we definitely don't want to do the data plane triggering in BBSIM. So at scale, you really just want to be able to handle the control plane. The data plane itself is always going to be in hardware. There is not anything we need to do to test data plane scale. So
yeah,
down the road, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just was there not a movement to add OMCI support on PONSIM? I mean, at one point it was being discussed, but I'm not sure where that stands right now.
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think I've
No?
ever heard of OMCI and POMSIM.
Okay.
Has anybody else on the call heard that?
No, but I agree we should unify the emulator. So either add OMCI to PONSIM or add the data plane to BBSIM. It doesn't really make sense to maintain two emulators.
Yeah, okay, that is correct. I agree. I agree.
Okay. And so the option that we've gone with go ahead.
I wanted to make one point in regard of the adapters, because I don't think the test actually care about which adapter is used. So I don't really get the point of prioritizing tests on one adapter versus another, because it really depends by the device that is attached to Voltha on the other side.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
that's what I was trying to say.
No, that's correct. But then the focus that I want to bring it up is that we are not explicitly testing on PONSIM. Let's say adding PONSIM devices and then testing it. Yes, it is transparent to the test, and because we do not go and then check what kind of adapters, as an example, right? So the the question here is, do we need to really, let's say in the current test cases, we are just installing BBSIM and then we are just running on them, and then also on a BBSIM device, related device. But then the question was really, do we really need to test on PONSIM devices or other devices?
Okay, so I think the answer is clear, and the focus is going to be on the new BBSIM. I wouldn't even say BBSIM; it's the new BBSIM that we want to go forward with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's clear. So we can just defocus if there are any questions about this. All right. Thank you.
Were you going to talk about the simulated adapter, or what does that bring us? What does that allow us to test with probably very limited control plane functionality?
Yeah, the simulated adapter is even less functionality than PONSIM. So not only does it not do OMCI, it's really something built to see how many things can the core handle, right? So it was the people who developed the core also built that thing. Just it's really just objects showing up in the core, right? The core isn't actually I don't know. It's not really doing the things that it normally would do under EAPOL, DHCP, whatever, and so on. It's really, can the core handle 500 or 1,000 or 50,000 objects showing up?
Okay.
So that's really just something for the core to measure its own scale and so on. Really, it's not meant for end-to-end testing.
Okay. Got it. All right.
Okay. Any other questions on this particular item? All right. Moving on, the next one is talking about commits on the test repo. So right now we have Voltha system test commits on the Gerrit, and I put this item to just my proposal was that what kind of tests or sanity checks we need to do when we are checking the commits on the Volta system test repo. So right now we have a basic checks, and let's say if somebody is making a change on the framework itself, and that could affect the functionality of the way how the sanity tests are running. And some of the sanity tests are very critical right now because they are run as part of the get patches from the various repos, like the development related patches. And if something breaks as part of that, then even the sanity tests break. So I was just thinking that should we run the sanity tests on BBSIM, just on the BBSIM, whenever we have a framework change that happens on the Volta system test repository. Any ideas or suggestions or comments?
I would say so. I'm not comfortable with. I'm making changes to the sanity test right now. With as I'm submitting my change for functional test cases, and I'd like to see that run, and then and nowhere does it run. I mean, it's running a unit test and something very basic, but nothing that exercises the test, the sanity test with BBSIM. I'd like to know that it's not going to break, but I can't. That's not possible at the moment.
Yeah.
So yes, I would agree.
Yeah, because even sometimes it really definitely it happened even previous in the past month that when somebody changed the framework itself, then the sanity test broke. So it's quite possible. Very simple change could break the sanity test. So that's why I was recommending that we should run some sanity checks on it.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. If we break the sanity tests, then nobody is able to get any patches through Garrett, and all work grinds to a halt. So we need to have assurance that that's not going to happen.
Okay. So Anyone else has any objections to that?
No, I see a potential problem in some cases where you need to upgrade the test framework because something has changed, and you can get in a loop of which patch gets verified first. To make an example, the new BBSIM has a different device, OLT device ID, and that needed to be updated in the test. But the test won't pass until the patch on BBSIM is merged.
Right, that's true.
So I'm fine with adding them. There may be some cases in which we need to go around that, but I think that there'll be few cases.
Yeah, there will be very few cases like that, but I think most of the cases at least would bypass that problem. At least
Yeah.
we know we can catch some of the issues that will break the sanity test itself.
Yeah. I have another question. Is there anything like a linting for a robot framework? Because like I'm not very familiar with it, but
there is, Matteo.
Yeah.
If you look in the Voltha system test repo, the makefile runs a robot lint, and that was recently added. Kailash found that before he left, and then I augmented it, and I think Hungwei also fixed the job. So that should work really well.
Okay, so it's running on the test.
Correct. So minor issues with that. There's also for robot, there's a tidy that'll clean up and make sure that everything is formatted well.
Okay, yeah, because like my very minimal experience with robot, I keep messing up the tabs versus spaces, and so having something that checks that is, I think it's important.
Yeah, so it's already there. All right, any other questions? Okay, so Zach, would you help us get this run as part of the system test repo? Just trigger the sanity tests on BBSIM job.
Okay, so it's just having the Voltha system tests. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, just the same job that we have on the Voltha system tests.
Okay, I think that actually almost already exists, but I'll check on it.
Yeah, we just need to get that trigger on these patches, that's all.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Zach. All right, so next item here, it's talking about the Jenkins test jobs itself. And then right now we are still enhancing by putting more debugging statements there. This item talks about, let's say we are running the nightly based jobs and something broke and the system test integration test failed. And I know in Volta's in the stabilization call some time back, we talked about having some of the test failures being reported on a Slack channel or somewhere to the mailing list so that people can start looking at it. Right now, we have very basic tests for sure, but then maybe we should start exercising that practice. So we have a process in place so that everybody knows that something has failed, and it also points to the log files. And if it's a critical failure, then people are alerted by it, and then they can start investigating or debugging it. So who would take the ownership, and how do we get that process? Should we put it on a Slack channel or onto the mailing list, or how do we do it? That's the topic that I wanted to discuss. Any suggestions, ideas?
I would need to think more about that. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't really.
Okay.
Yeah, historically, email coming out of Jenkins hasn't been that reliable. That needs to get fixed.
Yep.
And that so I think I'd prefer Slack for now. We could make that more reliable, but I think then people would start getting a lot of email. That might be a good thing and what we want. So I think I would prefer it to be Slack and public than email and private or only to certain people.
Okay. Yeah. And I think we also need to, because not every, do we also want to report like every failure right now, or we should, going forward, we also need to think like depending on the number of test failures or the criticality of failures, should we just monitor those and then just send them to the Slack channel, or just directly any failure just send it to the Slack channel?
So I think patch set failures should go only to the owner of the patch set. Like periodical tests, that should go to everyone.
Yeah, integration.
Yeah, like the test that we run, that should go to everyone. But if I send a patch that fails, that should go only to me, because then it's up to me to fix the patch before merging it.
Okay.
So the nightly regression ones go to everybody on Slack. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So this are you talking? This is just email, right? The patch sets, we can send that email to that owner of the patch, but the nightly, then we want to put it as part of a Slack channel. Maybe that is better. Or maybe we can take this topic later when we are seeing a lot of issues and we want something to happen.
Yeah, let's think about it a bit. I can poke the G5 and ask they prefer.
Okay.
So let me take that action item. Yeah.
All right. So
quick question in the meantime. Suraf, when is the next G5? Do you know?
I actually haven't scheduled anything, but let's talk about it on Slack and come up with the time.
Sounds good. Okay.
okay, I will add that later. So Sarah, I'll edit this so you can just look at it later. All right, so moving on, then renaming of jobs. So I think that must be from Zach.
Yeah, this is mine. So historically, we've had a naming scheme that was like verify the name of the repo and then the task. Or we have a few other ones, other conventions, like if there's a periodic job, it starts with periodic. When the jobs on the Voltha, like the sanity checks were created, they didn't follow this. It might be useful to have them match so people know whether something's a sanity job or whether something's a verify of a patch set job versus this being a periodic job. It would be nice to have naming consistency. And I was going to take this on. I just wanted to make sure that people knew that what was going on and that they're not in a who moved my job and why mode, that they know why this was done. Are there concerns about that?
But Zach, I thought like all the jobs are already having this, right? Or maybe there are something that's already missed.
So can you go to the Voltha 2.0 section of Jenkins?
Yeah.
So right now, a lot of them are named name of the repo and then sanity system test. And then we also have Voltha system tests. basically what I'd want to happen would be all the ones that rather be repo name, it would be verify, because those are run as a pre-merge verify job.
Okay, like we had in SIBA.
Yes. And then also, I'm not sure that having build in front of the test job for the second one down from the top is the best strategy, but we can do that. We can decide whether that's how that ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
I just want things to be clear for people, and if we don't have consistent naming, it's not particularly clear. Yeah, I can take this on. Just be aware that some of the names might change slightly to conform to that.
So is it
That
the
sounds
case?
good.
Is it the case that the second job has build in front of it, even though it's a test job?
That's correct, because I think
It's
it runs
because,
after.
right, it's testing the results of the
The build.
top job. So that sort of makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I was going to say. Because I think at the time we maintained this particular format and just added a tag called test so that we know that the tests are running off of the build job.
Right, and that's triggered after the build job automatically, correct?
Yes.
Unless you tell it not to.
Yes. Once.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
It's just the ones that lack the verify.
Yeah, I agree on the verify jobs. I think that makes more sense on the.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that renaming. It's fairly simple.
And the
And
other.
also the thing that we were talking about yesterday, right? That when things fail, it's actually really useful to know which containers have been newly downloaded because things have changed. And so if the container names or something, there's some printout in the console logs for the test that tells, okay, this container was built on this hash
Yeah,
commit.
so I had some back and forth, I think with Hungwei about that. Historically and actually currently, we are naming, we add a label, but I don't think those labels, he pointed out that those labels are not exposed in Kubernetes. So when we have certain items that are like following a master, we can't easily differentiate what changes and what the specific patch that was merged that isn't possibly causing a job to fail. I think we need to probably look into how to better track that. But I agree, Saurav, that we ought to have at least some parity in that reporting, that it was at least printing out which tags it was using.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the periodic jobs, right?
Right. So like
Yes.
if you look at the Voltha system test master, like the log on that.
You mean which one?
Bottom one,
this
Voltha system test master. If you look at the output of that, the console log of that one, at the very bottom, it will print that list that has the Kubernetes, or the name of the container and the tag.
Yeah, right. I already included it as part of the other build job. I think it looks like it already executed by the time it got merged. So
Okay.
you mean this part, right?
Yeah, that's the sort of output we wanted. And then there's some other output, the nodes one at the bottom.
Okay, the nodes one too. Okay. Oh, this can be added too.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that, OpenOLT adapter : master is not enough. So we should, like we were talking about yesterday, somehow be able to say which hash that container was built on.
But I don't think you have an easy way to know that.
Is there a hard way to know that?
I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, we should probably try to figure out something to identify these specifically. Either the either the Docker image hash, which isn't as useful, or the Git commit that they were built from. But I'm not sure that's available.
So one thing that I've done in the new BBSim is that when I build it, I store inside the binary the commit hash and whether the Git status was clean or dirty. So if there is an API that you can query and it will tell you which version of the code you're running. Maybe that's something we can use in other situations.
And I know that Volt control and other stuff will expose that information. There's a version option that you can call that we probably ought to call after it's brought up. It'll print out both the CLI version and the remote server version. I'm not sure it'll tell adapter versions. That would be nice. So the conclusion on this is that we need to determine more version information during tests and print it out either before or after the test is executed, so we can know what we're running, so we can root cause things. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So let's add that.
So while Zach is doing that, any other concerns regarding this item? Renaming of jobs. Okay. We have 5 more minutes before we end the call. Are there any concerns, questions, or anything else that we want to quickly?
Yeah, I have one thing that I forgot to add on the meeting notes. I'm sorry about that. So the new BBSim is behaving like a real OLT when you delete it from Voltha, meaning that once you do delete device, the process will actually restart. And I've noticed that during the test, this is an issue with reporting the logs, because the last step in the test is delete the OLT. That will cause the BBSim container to restart, and so the logs are gone. So if something fails, there is not an easy way to get those logs. Now, I don't exactly know how to solve this, but I just wanted to throw it out there because maybe someone has an idea on how to do this.
So when you get the delete command, is there a way that you can reach out somewhere and copy the logs over before that restarting?
Yeah, I think we can do that in the test. We can just copy that. We need to explicitly add that and then do it. And then delete it.
Yeah, we can think about this. I think it's not urgent for now. Another option is that is to set a flag in BBSim that says do not restart, that we can set while running the test so we can get to the logs.
But is
I
it?
don't know, maybe.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just asking a question. So is that the container restart, is that required, or it's just the behavior?
It's not required, but it's the same thing that the real OLT is doing.
Okay, because on the real OLT, the delete operation doesn't go through often. It's like very rarely you would be able to delete the OLT. I'm not sure if you're observing the same thing on the new BBSIM now.
Well, looking at the test, it looks that is fairly consistent in working with the delete.
Okay, because on the physical part, you can't get it to delete without any errors. Yeah, maybe that's a different item, but yeah. So you're saying that that's what is happening on the real so OLT.
Yeah, so it's helpful if you're doing multiple runs, because anytime BBSIM restarts, it starts from a completely clean state. So ideally, you should be able to keep bringing it up. Then it's not working. There is a Jira open for it. But that's probably some bad state that is left in Voltha. So an easy fix for that is to put that behind a flag. So when we start BBSIM, we can tell it not to restart if we want to. But we can also like leave it there, wrap our heads around it, and get back to it next week. Maybe we have some good ideas.
Okay, I can add that item on for the next call as well.
Yeah. Along the same lines, when is the new BBSIM will becoming mainstream? Like from kind Voltha, is there a way with a flag that we can call the new one versus the old one, or is the new one going to be substituted?
As now, you'll get the new one by default with kind Voltha.
Oh yeah. Oh okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. As of when? As
of yesterday.
As of yesterday. Okay.
Yeah, I think I sent out an email on the Voltha mailing list when we merged the patch.
Okay. Okay. I might have missed that. Okay. I'll see. Thank you very much.
And Suchitra, you could probably add another action item for me to figure out if there are others who can add physical pods for testing, just like Infosys is doing.
Oh, okay. So like you will be finding out from other groups, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we are on the time now. It's 9:30. So any other items, topics that you want to discuss or need more details, then please add it to the next meeting. So I think that's all for this call now. We can see you all next week then at the same time.
Thanks, Suchitra.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
That's all.